I will this presentation in a way that Christo liked, which means with passion and fun. Giving somebody who wished to be cried, neither was Jean-Claude, and therefore I'm going to go in this state of mind. To start with,
hold yourself, step in the fabric. Don't stand like that. No, in the fabric. Because I'll step in the fabric. It's not only the door. At the moment, it's all sides. Crazy. They're crazy. Totally crazy. Never open the fabric before buying it. Never. Leave the 5 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters to the ship, but don't do that. The moment everything can happen, the wind can blow, everything. This is why okay, start, Pablo. We start. Okay. You will never fabric. No fabric. No fabric. Crazy. Robert, do not open fabric before you find the thing down.
in the document which is just out, Christo looked like a Greek god. It was 4 years ago on the lake of Brescia, and he was 81 years old. So this is how I'm going to start to look at the projects, how they appeared on the map, on the global map. Jean-Claude and Christo's project, one by one, 14 of them in 4 continents, and L'Arc de Triomphe, the Mastaba in progress, which is still to happen. Here are the few pictures of some of them, not all of them, but some of them, trying to see how extravagant they were. This one is at the same time opening umbrellas in California and in Japan, where islands were stranded, the Pont Neuf was wrapped, the Reichstag was wrapped, the barrels were built, and the gates, we will talk about the gates later on, and the floating piers took place in 4 years ago. So I think that behind all this beauty and this extravagant ephemera work, in fact, they used to call their project appropriation of this for a short time, appropriation of public works. There was a very sophisticated logistics that I want to discuss with you now. I made a diagram that we can follow together. This diagram starts at the center, this white circle, which was the way the work was conceived. They created in 1982 a CVG corporation on Howard Street, for which Christo was a registered agent. The first they did receive the project and started to finance it through selling wings and to the collectors at the and with the finances they have, they would secure their financial autonomy and work with special bankers that would friends before they would go to the engineers to ask them to think about conception of work. Those engineers selected through something called the Shanghai Codex, which is the Bible for engineers from the world. So they would have public markets, and they would set a team of engineers who realize their their dreams, actually. After they elected the engineers, they went to officials, to mayors, to presidents, to negotiate the public authorization to appropriate public space for a while. Lectures, they would get a wider attendance, and then they would go back to the engineers for the realization of it. Just to say that some projects lasted years before they could be realized, and when they reached to a public space, they would also use a very interesting communication system, one single photographer, Gang Wolf, and one single team of filmmakers, the and then they would reach the public at large. So we see in this system that they would bypass both traditional system market with galleries and so on, and they would also bypass the traditional corporate sponsorship. And in a way, this Christo and Jean-Claude's alternative universe was challenging all boundaries as a practice of freedom. In fact, the other model of the art system, where the first one since the medieval ages, the system of the patron, who used to come to the artist. Patron would be a priest, would be a prince, would be a corporation or a state. By the 19th century, there was the system of the galleries, who were the intermediaries between the artist and the collectors. But with the system of the Christos, I think they are the artists who ventured them furthest in controlling production, in bypassing all systems, and it's offering a total access to their public. And I think it's remarkable and needed a phenomenal logistics.
Real things, real wind, real dry, real water, real fear, real joy.
But Christo does not sit.
I don't sit.
Yeah.
I do not sit. I like to sit. That's not working properly. Not working. How is working? All our projects, they work so far, and they're totally useless. They exist only because myself and Jean-Claude like to see them and to realize. Not change like that, I'm sorry. Like to see the fabric secure to that. Everything and you attention to help us to keep that project going. You know, it's a very, very demanding project. It's not like garden. You need to keep everything in good order.
Well, you know, with the Floating Piers, especially the logistics were incredibly exciting, because what the public would see were the monitors, which were the people dressed in black, who had stations. They were the piers, and they were in charge of the respect for safety rules. You know, the people were not allowed to dive, to rent, but they were only the visible part of the project. But around was a team of almost 1,000 experts gathered for horror in the Russia, engineers, divers, technicians, assemblers, expressors, sailors, aviators, elite commanders who assembled, realized, and coming from 5 countries speaking Italian, Bavarian, German, and French, in a way, as a micro-society, operated in total autarky. And they managed to attract a crowd of more than 1 million people. And for us that witnessed that event or that project, I think it was mesmerizing. Because when you looked on the pier, first of all, there was the magic of walking on water, which was unbelievable. There was also a feeling of precariousness because those piers had no boards, so you were a little scared because you were unbalanced. You could not do the ramp. Magic, precariousness, feeling of power, beauty around, and the tension between all those new things was something extremely special. I want to quote Matthias when he says, Christo and Jean-Claude's projects have no purpose, and at the same time, they have one. They force people to think. They awaken feelings in people, and that happened in all their projects. So they claimed that the work of art was not only these 2 weeks of public appropriation of public space, but it was the whole process. Negotiation was also part of the journey. And also one thing which I find fascinating is that they challenged the traditional romantic conception of the artist as a lonely soul who has to fight society for his recognition. They challenged the single artist by starting co-signing their works in 1994. And they also challenged gender roles because everybody who knew them knew that the businessman was Jean-Claude and the artist was Christo. In fact, it is, I think, meaningful today that we heard about the second racist assassination in the United States within a month in Atlanta, and witnessing a wave of racial murders. I think it's very meaningful because Christo himself was very cautious in compartmentalizing what he said about his own life and assessing that his works had no political meaning. Nevertheless, he lived in very troubled times. He lived through terrible political tensions, and that he challenged his own way, his own brilliant way. So let's look at this odyssey of the artist in the Balkans. Christo is here to the left with his older brother Anani to the right and his younger brother Stefan to the left, 3 sons of this chemist who had studied in Vienna and whom they had to visit in jail. Sorry, I went backwards instead of going forwards. So the Bulgarian regime was the toughest of all the Stalinist regimes. Here Christo is attending a drawing lesson in Gabrovo, 1949. It is a year where Stalin turned 70. And there was this absolutely crazy birthday for Stalin that everybody had to celebrate before his death in 1953. So the Bulgarian regime was totally rigid and living, especially in the art school, under the social realism. There was no way you could go out of that. So Christo decided to escape from the Soviet bloc. In red, vertically, you can see what was called the Iron Curtain during the Cold War era, and Soviet Union to the east, with East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and so on. And so in Sofia, Christo decided to travel to Prague to go to his great uncle, because his father's mother was from Prague. And later on, he decided to bribe actually, the most interesting is the moment where he traveled. He left Sofia for Prague in October 1956, which was the date of the Hungarian Revolution in Budapest. He could not take the train because the train couldn't run. The Hungarian students revolted against Stalin, but they were destroyed by the tanks. So Christo took a plane for Prague. And then from Prague, he decided to go to the West. What did he do? He bribed the employee of a train, and he asked him to travel in a commercial wagon. That's how he arrived in Vienna. And in Vienna, he decided to drop his suitcase in the train so that he would not look like a refugee. He had on a piece of paper the name of a friend of his father who had studied chemistry with him. So he decided to take a cab. He showed the paper to the cab driver and thought, if my father's friend is at home, I will be saved. If he's not at home, I'll end up in a camp. Actually, the friend was at home. And Christo lived with him and started to study in the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna for a semester. And the drawing teacher he had was the same drawing teacher that somebody who failed twice to enter Vienna's art academy had in 1907 and 1908. The man who failed was called Adolf Hitler. So just to tell you that Christo's story is really mingled with the dark moments of Europe. After Vienna, he traveled to Geneva, supporting himself by drawing portrait pictures of women of the good society. And then he arrived in Paris. And in 1964, they moved to New York. This is what he said. About his life. Making always a point not to link it with his art. Sofia, let's follow it. The Hungarian Revolution in Budapest, October 1956. Prague. Vienna. Geneva, in Paris. These are the words he used to define his own identity: stranger, foreigner. And there are some 3 works that I just want to show, which were openly autobiographical. L'Étranger, painted after he read Albert Camus in 1958, a painting that has disappeared. Actually, we don't know who owns it. The Iron Curtain, June 27th, 1962, Rue Visconti, and Green Storefront, a metaphor for my escape from Bulgaria, showed at Leo Castelli in 1964. In his stay in Paris, very soon, Christo met Jeanne-Claude de Guilbon, who became his wife, his partner. And together they built this extraordinary partnership and logistically, artistically, aesthetically, until the gates. And everything was gathered in one single space, Soho, Howard Street, just one block north of Canal Street, where they used to say laughingly, we were illegal aliens living in an illegal building. Actually, one of the other ordeal that Christo had to face was the passing away of Jeanne-Claude when they were giving a lecture and she fell. It was November 2009, and I will always remember how I was informed. I was informed by that picture. Christo bought one whole page in the New York Times from her friends around the world. 22nd of November. And I was about to give a talk in Memphis, Tennessee, in the Lorraine Motel, where Martin Luther King was assassinated. I knew she was sick. I saw this page and I decided to dedicate my talk to Jeanne-Claude. And when I flew back to New York 2 days later, I was about to write a note to Christo, but his nephew, Vladimir, who had been my student, had left a message. He said, Christo wants to have dinner with you at Balato tonight. I'll pick you up. So Vladimir picked me up and said, you're going to meet with Christo. He wants to ask you something. Please don't cry. So I went to Balato's and Christo asked me if I was ready to speak at Jeanne-Claude's memorial service 6 months later. So how did he react to the passing away of his wife, who was with him in a totally symbiotic couple? He created an event for her, which he prepared for 6 months, hosted by Philippe de Montebello at the Metropolitan Museum at the center, with Maya Bloomberg, John Calder, the collector from Australia, Elizabeth Brown from the Smithsonian, the magical historical art historian Leo Steinberg, the other one, Calvin Tompkins, and the critic for architecture, the New York Times, Paul Goldberger. I think 6,000 people attended the event, and that was the way Christo reacted to Jeanne-Claude's passing away. He went on, he worked, and he lived in New York. And here is another page of the New York Times, which appeared on May 24th, a few weeks ago, to describe the number of deaths from the pandemic. Christo lived in New York during the lockdown period, and that's what he said. He accepted the ordeal again. He worked Howard Street. That's where he was, in the whole building, which was the whole life. And that's what he did. actually this lockdown didn't suit him that much. And I think that's what he said during the interview for CNN. I think this is breathtaking. Now I am prisoner at Harvard Street. But the way out he found was going to the roof. And this is the last movie, the last film of him, shot by Lorenza, who gave it to me. It's extraordinary. An ode to the city of New York, cosmopolitan city for the uprooted man. And that's my final picture. That's how I see this couple as teenagers running down the dunes in the desert. And I give the last word to my friend Patrick Boucheron. From Virgil to Augustine, from the Aeneid to the Confessions, our great tales heroes are men who flee, just as Aeneas, escaping from the flames and the ruins of the Trojan knight. The men who fled are indeed the ones who invented the world that we inhabit today. That's the end of my presentation with the assistant of Adrian Perez Casanovas, and I want to send my love to Lorenza Giovanelli, Jonathan Henry in New York, Matthias Gudenberg in Münster, Andrei Paunov, Anastas Petkov in Sofia, Trevor Twitten in Paris, Isabella Tsenkova in Sofia, Wolfgang Volz in Stockholm, and Vladimir Yavachev, my dear student, in Sofia, for their availability, their generosity, their competence, and their passion in making this moment possible. Now, this is Adrian Benepe, New York City Parks Commissioner. Is he around?
Yes, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. That was lovely. It was breathtaking. You know, I first, you could compare, I think, Christo and Jean-Claude, and I think of them always together, as kind of like a very benign Captain Ahab from Moby Dick. Mm-hmm. Because they pursued relentlessly the idea of doing the gates from the 1970s onward. I don't remember when they first proposed it because I wasn't there at the time, but I do recall that when Mayor Koch was the mayor of New York City and Gordon Davis was the Parks Commissioner, and Central Park was a big mess. It was before the Conservancy. They proposed to do the gates, and at the time, Gordon Davis, as commissioner, wrote a very, very eloquent 150-page report and determination on why they were not going to allow the gates to go up. And at the time he said, the work of restoring Central Park is too important right now and too undone to have this work of art be imposed on restoring the work of art. It was very important to say that Central Park was a work of art. And then really for the next 25 years, the city of New York would politely or maybe not so politely keep saying no. In fact, I was one of the agents whose job it was to say no. In the late 1980s, I had a very august title, which is kind of a joke, Director of Art and Antiquities. People would laugh and say, what antiquities? And in fact, there are two antiquities in New York City parks. There's the, what they call the Cleopatra's Needle, the obelisk, the Egyptian obelisk in Central Park. And there's oddly, a Roman column of Jerash, which was part of the old World's Fair left. So it was my job at the time under a different mayor, under Mayor Giuliani, to again drive around the park with Christo and Jean-Claude and politely explain why we still weren't ready to do this. So that was a good 15 years later. And then it wasn't until Mayor Bloomberg was elected and I was appointed Parks Commissioner that Mayor Bloomberg and Patricia Harris, who was his first deputy mayor, both of whom were very big supporters of public art and art in general. I have to say, it was then that the mayor said to me, very gently, he said, "Do you think we could do the gates now? Is it time? Can you figure this out?" And Deputy Mayor Harris, Patty, and I went down to visit Christo and Jean-Claude at the Howard Street building. And we started to talk to them. Could this be possible? And the mayor also said to me, "But we have to do it in a way so it doesn't hurt the park. The park can't be damaged." And of course, that was part of the problem all along. The original concept of 15,000 gates would have required, at the time, 30,000 holes dug in the park, and not small holes either, at least 3 foot by 3 foot holes, excavated through the rock, through the plants, through the tree roots, with concrete footings poured to support these gates. And it was kind of a non-starter. And so the first challenge was, how do we do this so it doesn't injure the park? And here I want to pay tribute to a very important collaborator who's rarely named, who was the engineer on most of these projects, a guy named Vince Davenport. And Vince and his wife, Jonita, were really part of the team, along with many of the others that you've seen named. And it was Vince who had an idea, a really ingenious idea. He came up with a concept, which was to put the, he had seen the vertical elements of the gates are made of an extruded vinyl. And this extruded vinyl is very lightweight, but very strong. He had seen it on corrals, horse corrals around the country, and came up with an idea of making the gates out of extruded vinyl and having them sit locked on heavy weights on the path. So they would not have to dig a single hole in the park. And that was the key moment, the big aha moment. The other aha moment was, can we move it from the fall to the winter when we won't have bird migration problems? Everybody said the gates and the curtains will scare the birds. And so they were willing to move it to winter, which is a very dead time in New York City and also a dead time for tourism. So having passed those two hurdles, the rest was just money. And I will point out this other thing, the very good chart that Annie shows about avoiding the need for the gallery system and for corporate sponsors. They said they would pay for the whole thing themselves. So we said, how will you do this? Will you get corporate sponsorship? They said, no, absolutely not. And I'll always remember Jean-Claude saying, we will sell artworks done by the hand of Christo to people who buy the art, and they'd use the proceeds of the sale of the art to pay for the whole thing. And it was, they would never disclose the cost, but I will tell you, it was tens of millions of dollars. And they paid for all of the costs of the fabrication. They paid for all the city costs, all the police, the security, and in addition to that, they made a $3 million payment to the city of New York, kind of as a rental fee for that temporary appropriation of public space. They wanted it to be very fair, and it was also to say, should anybody ever try to do this again, that is to take over Central Park for 16 days, here's the cost, right? Here's the walking in the door cost. So they were extremely honorable throughout the whole thing. And it was an extraordinary thing because so many people were against it. The community boards we had to go to endless meetings, community meetings, to convince people that this would be okay. There were a lot of people against it. They, my predecessor, God rest his soul, Henry Stern, referred to them as orange schmatas. I mean, he was very, he didn't get it either. But I think everybody, when it was done, said, you know, I can't remember what I was opposed to because it's so beautiful, so lovely. And the one thing, there are many interpretations. Of course, Christo and Jean-Claude would never explain the art, but I will say that we understood, and let's hold in this picture for a while. For the first time, I think people understood that Central Park is not just a flat space in the middle of the city. That has a very varied topography that rolls across the landscape. And effectively, Christo and Jean-Claude took an orange highlighter and highlighted the topography with their lines of gates across the landscape. It was particularly beautiful, as you recall, during the snow. I will say one final thing. The gates happened at a very dark time for New York. Many of you will remember when we've had the first meetings, it was January or February of 2002. I had just been appointed. This was 4 or 5 months after 9/11. And many of you who are New Yorkers will recall, it was a very, very dark time for us. It was for me personally. My mother had just died. And this was a way to bring New York City back to life. We didn't know that at the time because, remember, there were no tourists coming to New York. It was considered a city to avoid, to get out of. It was dangerous and dark. We were in the middle of a terrible economic recession in New York, a local recession. The budget was in shambles. And this celebration, these 16 days, brought millions of tourists to New York and brought life back to New York and created a boom that lasted the entire 12 years of the Bloomberg-Merrill administration, where tourists went from 20 million a year to 55 million. Some people would say too many. I think Christo would have said too many. But it had an extraordinary civic celebration of bringing New York back to life. And all the people who were against it said, I can't remember why I was against it because it was just so beautiful, including my father, who was kind of against it and then really thought it was extraordinary. A final thought. I am the child of an immigrant parent. My mother was a war refugee. And I totally understand why Christo finally felt a safe space in New York, because New York has always been a city of immigrants and refugees. And I think he felt, I am now finally a member of a society where immigrants are welcome. And I think that's why his art flourished so much, because he finally found a city that was safe and nourishing for immigrants and for artists and for refugees. And an extraordinary thing for New York and for the world. And I miss them both dearly.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much. Bernard, I'm going to start with the video if you want to show the exhibition. Bernard. Voilà, Bernard, this is you. You're responsible for Christo in Paris, July 1st and September 18th. Cannot hear you.
Bernard has to unmute.
I cannot hear you. We cannot hear you, Bernard.
Hi, everybody. Set time for all of us, and set time because, as you know, Christo is not going to open his exhibition. Set time because of coronavirus and the fact that we had to postpone the opening of the exhibition, which was supposed, to be in March. By the way, I went to New York and I had an interview with Christo, which has been published by the French magazine Art Presse. And I must say that I was very impressed with the energy of Christo, despite the fact that, as you mentioned before, he spent, a couple of months confined, in the building. But anyway, it's sad for me, of course, to open the exhibition the 1st of July, and we decided to postpone it until November in order to celebrate the exhibition and what he wanted to do. Well, I guess as Annie described, there's a strong relation between Christo and Paris. And of course, I'm not going to relate the history of Christo and Jean-Claude, but as you know, this is in Paris, where, he went in 1958, that Christo met his wife, Jean-Claude, and fall in love with her until her death. So Paris was, for me, the key point of, the history of Christo before he decided to move in United States in 1964. And as you've seen, on one of the photographies, when he moved to Paris, Paris was under, not a civil war, but some, big manifestations in the streets. And he said, oh shit, it's exactly the same than in Praga or than everywhere, you know, in the east of Europe, which I decided to live. And he stayed, and what he did in 1962 with the Iron Curtain, you know, on Rue Visconti, a small street in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, was definitely as a political gesture after the Algerian War, which was a civil war, you know, in one way. And despite of the fact that, as both of you said before, that Christo never talked about a political impact of what he did, I guess that we need to consider that what he did all his life was both aesthetical and political.
Yeah.
In 1963, as you know, he was one of the members of the New Realists, this French pop, you know, movement in which you find artists like Armand, like Raymond Heinz, César, and many others. But in one way, it seems to me that Paris was too historical and too related to the past for him. So he decided to go to the States, and once again, as all of you know, with the support of Leo Castelli, he made his first storefront. When I went to visit him in New York, you know, he said to me that his big storefront, which he made for Leo Castelli, will join the Pompidou collection. And I hope you save time to come to Paris, and you will see both this extraordinary exhibition and the storefront, which belongs now to our permanent collection as a gift from this extremely generous guy, as Adrian said before, who was extremely generous with all of us, and so generous that he decided, as you know, to build the Arc de Triomphe, which was one of his dreams he had, which you can find in one drawing he drew in 1961. So I invited him to give a survey to the Pompidou. And he said to me, oh, you know, I would like to concentrate, you know, my exhibition about my Paris years. So we decided to work all together. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of pleasure to put together all these works which were dispatched all over the world. And when you come to Paris, you will see a lot of works, you know, which has never been shown before, including this incredibly early paintings, you know, which prefigurate the early empaquetage from the early 60s. And at the same time, we walked together, and I told him, you know, Christo, I'm bringing you back to Paris, so you need to wrap something for me. Why don't you try to wrap the Centre Pompidou? And he looked at me and he said to me, it's totally impossible because of your pipes, the structure of the building, it would never fit. But I have an idea. I dream to wrap Arc de Triomphe. I say, but you're kidding. Arc de Triomphe, you know, is one of the most glorious monument of Paris. It has been built under Napoleon I, you know, to celebrate the victory of, you know, the Austerlitz battle in 1805. And as you know, there is under the monument the tomb of the unknown soldier who died in the First World War. How could you expect to do that? And he said to me, you must try. So I went to our president, Mr. Macron, you know, who said to me immediately, we do it. I support it. You must do it. And I told him, but Mr. President, could you imagine what it means to do something like that? And he said to me, of course I do. But, you know, he did the Reichstag in Germany, in Berlin. So he's going after, you know, the Pont Neuf in the 80s to come back to Paris and to do something in the most glorious, with the eternal flame, you know, monument of our capital. Christo couldn't believe me. He said to me, but how did you get it? And I told him the truth. I didn't do anything except talking to the president, who was the only one who could give us the authorization to do it. But I didn't do anything. And he was totally impressed, you know, with the fact that we could get such a crazy authorization in such a short time. And he said to me, don't worry now, Bernard, I will take care about everything. I will find the money, don't talk about anything. I have a company with which I've been working, you know, when we were together, you know, for Le Pont Neuf. I'm going to call them again. By the way, everything is in my mind and everything is almost ready. So the team, you know, this friendship, which has always been around Christo, started to work and to find all the technical system, to make a model, to build, you know, all this incredibly, you know, capacity of inventing a solution, not only dreaming about something, but as Adrian said before, make it possible. And I was very impressed with that. And I guess that I have been impressed for a while with the capacity of Christo and Jean-Claude to finalize, to bypass, as you said before. He was very criticized because people considered, both with his wife, that they tried to have it both ways. But of course, Christo was over, you know, the art system milieu and was trying to develop something which was maybe near architecture as a great expectation, which was, you know, overpassing all the technical problems, all, you know, the difficulties, which are definitely part of his activities. Unfortunately, because everything has been hard in Christo's life, I called him back, well, let's say 6 months ago, and I told him, Christo, we cannot wrap the Arc de Triomphe anymore. And he said to me, but why? He gave me all the authorization and everything is now ready. And I told him, just before I called you, I just got a phone call from the French president, who said to me, Bernard, I give you all the authorization, except the fact that I didn't know that the falcons, you know, nets on the roof between March and April. And I'm ready to follow you for everything, but I cannot give you an authorization which is going, you know, to impeach this common kestrel, this bird, you know, to nest on the roof for a couple of months. And Christo laughed and said to me, we can't do anything against the birds. We can do everything about human beings, but we can't do anything against the birds. So he said to me, let's postpone it. And we were supposed to postpone by the end of this year when he died. But the family around myself and the estate and all the people said to me that it has to happen. So I am in one way happy to tell you that we will wrap, you know, the Arc de Triomphe in homage to Christo and Jean-Claude by the end of next September, which is for me extremely important. September 2022, because 2021 is, as you know, the date of his exhibition in Paris. So there is something very sad in this story. The fact that we proposed a survey to Christo in this city where he met love and where he wanted to come back. Sad also because of the fact that for different kinds of reasons, we needed 2 times to postpone everything. One time with the falcons, another time with the virus. But there is something I love in art, which overpass our life and which confront ourselves with the eternity. So big hug to Christo, a big hug to all the people who's been extremely supportive since the beginning, and the show must go on, as you stay in the States. And it seems to me that if we consider Christo's work, this is definitely a combination of visual art, architecture, spectacle, conceptual in one way, but also something which is definitely connected to our real life, and to our, you know, necessity of dreaming, and the city as, you know, the center of our dream. Is definitely, you know, what I can expect from my own position, which of course, you know, will be celebrating with the wrapping of the Arc de Triomphe.
Wonderful, thank you, Bernard.
Thanks to you, my friends.
Thank you, Bernard. So I have a question for you, Bernard. Can you hear me?
Sure, I do.
You know, he said recently, he said the entire wrapping of the Arc de Triomphe will be simultaneous in all directions. The fabric will come from above and it will be like a moving, living person. And the fabric will move like a breathing, you see. So I think it's extraordinary that he imagined the Arc de Triomphe becoming a human being. Don't you think?
I guess he had everything in mind, and when we found the solution to wrap it, he had many collage and drawings, and he explained me what he was expected from it. He said to me, when you wrap it, it becomes as a ghost image.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, this monument, which is dedicated to all the soldiers, you know, as something dramatic and even pre-romantic with which he liked to play. And he said to me that there is always in his work something which is choreographic. And it seems to me that, you know, as you described before, when, you know, the fabric will fall down, you know, it will be like, let's say, like a ghost image, you know, in movement. It reminds me the fantastic movie from Abel Gance, you know, where the soldiers from the Great Army are coming back from, you know, the earth. And Christo knew perfectly what was the symbol of this monument, as he knew perfectly that he couldn't touch to the eternal flame, which is in the middle. By the way, it seems to me that what he did was always extremely respectful from the environment. Extremely, he never tried to jeopardize anything. He was underlining something, and he was asking you to pay attention to something which could be nature or architecture, but architecture was part of nature. So
Bernard, one thing which he said that cross of the 4 arches of the Arc de Triomphe is incredible. And he wanted to wrap simultaneously. When I asked a historian of architecture, Hala Warley, she told me that when the Arc de Triomphe was built, it was a very beautiful exercise in stereotomy, which means that the 4 pillars were built simultaneously. The stones were perfectly symmetrical, mirror replicas, and sometimes needed to be cut upside down. So basically, by wrapping it, he would reciprocate exactly the movement of the building of the Arc de Triomphe, which is a very specific stylistic figure with 2 cross vaults and a cross keystone.
But you know, Annie, when you look at the drawing, which you see actually, I do know that the result will be exactly the same, which means that everything has been previewed before. The color, of course, of the fabric, the effect at night, the relation between the blue, the red, and the white, which are, as you know, the colors of the flag, of the French flag. And of course, it reminds me when he said to me, well, in fact, you will get discreetly the 3 colors, you know, of the French flag with the selection of the fabric and the ropes, which I will use to wrap, you know, the Arc de Triomphe. It was extremely subtle, and the selection of the colors, and as you described before, the fact that the fabric is going to follow the monument and to give as a shadow image of each of the statues which are on the monument, make it alive in a way. That's why, you know, I was describing this movie by Abel Gance, which means that the soldiers, you know, will will come back to the surface. This is the miracle with Christo, something which is really specific to what he does. When you wrap something, you reveal it more than when you let it intact.
It reminds me, you know, this absolute need of autonomy, this urgency of being autonomous and free, reminds me of the very first letter he wrote to his brother Anani from Prague. He said, I am making money by cleaning, by washing cars, by washing dishes, by making drawings. And as soon as I'm autonomous, I'll go to Paris and I'll go to Italy. So this absolute need for freedom and need for autonomy is something which drove him until now, until 2 weeks ago. And do you think that, I think it's extremely interesting by listening to Adrian and listening to you, Bernard, how the gates gave life again to the city of New York, which was completely destroyed by 9/11, the feeling of the city. And after what we just went through in Paris, that him, Christo, and the project, the Jean-Claude and Christo project, from the Immigrant Forever, would be, they would be giving life again to our city, is just, after they passed away, is just extraordinary.
But you know, everything becomes possible with Christo, of course, with his energy and whatever, what we described before, but also with the fact that there is as a family plot around him. And I do know that Vladimir, Jonathan, Lorenza, and all the speakers.
Yes, Wolfgang.
Yes, definitely.
Chapu, Laure
Yes.
Martin, that we have to quote here because she's been essential for the...
That I'm absolutely convinced that all the people around, you know, who loved definitely this guy, really, you know, will do everything, you know, possible to make it happen. All of you know that last year we had like every week a demonstration in Champs-Élysées. And of course I talked to Christo and I told him, come on, Christo, you know what happened during a few months in Paris. Of course, France is always the city of demonstration, and thanks God, we demonstrate with what happened in the States, you know, 2 weeks ago. And I do love this solidarity with American people. But anyway, he said to me, of course I know, I've seen, you know, all this demonstration. So we need, in one way, to do this wrapping, because I need to repair, in one way, Arc de Triomphe. And what I do is as a celebration of the building, but also of the history of the building from the very beginning of 19th century, when it has been built in 1805 until, you know, now. So I have to fix something, and I will do it.
Okay, so now, Shannon, please, can we have the questions? Shannon?
Yes, actually, Ani, I wanted to ask if you could play the first video you showed one more time.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
The very first one, right?
The very first one, yes.
Where he looks like a Greek god. That
Yes.
he, okay.
Hold it, John, pick up. Step in the fabric. Don't stay like that. No, hold the feet up in the fabric. I don't like to have people outside of the fabric. Please, you have to wait. You are Christo. It's not only storm. At the moment, it's all sign. It's crazy. They're crazy. They're crazy. Totally crazy. Never open the fabric before Carolina. Never. Leave the 5 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters for the ship, but don't do things like that. But everything can happen. The wind can blow up. Everything. This is like. Yeah, I know. No. Okay, stop. We stop. Okay, stop. They will never find that fabric on the water. No fabric anymore, fabric. No fabric opening. Crazy. Robert, do not open fabric before carabiner is installed. Machine down.
Thank you. And we just got a question asking if you could show the slide again on Christo's organization, the traditional structure of the art market, work with engineers, just so we could see that chart again. Wonderful. Yes, and could you explain that whole process one more time?
At the center, it's the organization that they built in 1982, September 1982. They did a corporation with the initials of Christo's name, CVJ, Christo Vladimir Yavatchev Corporation, based in Howard Street. So Howard Street was the center of everything. And the CEO of the corporation was Christo, and the registered agent was Jean-Claude. So it was both a craftsman studio and a corporation, a multinational corporation. So that's where they initiated the project, they conceived the project. And in order to finance them, Christo was doing his collages and drawings that you saw in the studio recently, and selling them to the collectors, to their collectors directly, without going to the galleries, bypassing the art market system. With the money they made here, they were creating a credit line in the banks. They had private banks. And then they would try to see how feasible it was. Let's say, for the floating piers, how do you walk on water? I brought to Christo, my husband, who's a physicist, who said to him, but how do you do that? And my husband went away totally mesmerized, because Christo explained that they had asked, so they opened the market, they looked at the Shanghai Codex, which is the Bible for all the best engineers in the world. And they opened the market to say, how do you suggest that we walk on water? And one guy suggested to build cubes of plastic full of water, full of oxygen, that would be anchored down to the lake with very, very strong anchors, you see? So this is these were the engineers that they hired, and they paid a very high price for them. And then they started negotiating the possibility of renting the space from the officials, from the mayor of the city, from the prefect of the region, and so on. And then they started to, and that took time, Sometimes, for the Reichstag, for example, they were rejected 3, 4, 5 times, and actually they loved it. They loved this risk-taking. They loved the challenge of, of convincing the officials. I remember for the Pont Neuf, they went to see Jacques Chirac. They went to see all the officials. And I remember there's a very interesting movie where Jean-Claude said to the guy, what do you do with your money? Do you buy a diamond for your wife? I'm not interested in diamonds. You would buy a 4 million diamond ring for your wife. I'm not interested in a diamond ring. With the money that my husband makes with his drawings, we are going to wrap the Pont Neuf. This is the way she was. She was very funny, very challenging, always bypassing, always transgressing, to make your dream come true. And you see, when he spoke, we saw him in another clip, you know, speaking to little kids in a class. You know, he loved talking. They loved talking to, lecturing, talking to colleges, to schools. And a boy, I think the boy was from Harlem, and he asked Christo, you need a lot of patience to do your job, And Christo said, no. First of all, it's not a job, it's a passion, and I don't need patience, I have passion, you know? So they were completely subverting the traditional conception of work, of art, of genders, of society. So what they were lecturing, then when they got the authorization, the engineers would realize the work, and then all the publicity, all the communication would be done through the three people who controlled the image, which was Wolfie for the photos and the Meisels brothers for the films, you see? And then, so they would reach the public at large. So what is very interesting, so bypassing the art market and bypassing the corporate sponsorship. I will show you something. I don't know, can you see me on screen or not now? No? Can you see me on screen? No. Because no. I have something, no? I have something to show. Can you see me here? No? Because I want to show you something here. No, I cannot. I see myself in black. Could you get me?
Release your video. Release your video camera, Annie.
Okay, here. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, here. So this is what I brought back from Floating Piers. What is that? It is a little gift that would give to every single participant, some people who ventured on the Floating Piers. So the interesting is that, you know, when you entered the Floating Piers, it was time to go piers. To the left, there was a path to go left to the road, where the collectors would see the drawings and the collages would buy. So collectors would sign for $100,000 or something like that. It would be done by Josie Kraft, part of the team. And the collectors would be taken by Christo on a boat to see the whole setup. But people who didn't pay would experience this extraordinary dream, and in the end, they would be given this piece of fabric, which is a relic, and which only by it remember the magic of the moment, I think. And I think it's brilliant because it's a redistribution of wealth. You know, it's.
May I interrupt you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, I like to interrupt you because there is something to me which we cannot underestimate. The fact that this guy, when he arrived, you know, in New York with his wife, he found a way to invent a new, well, let's say, means of production. And he found, I guess it's related to the graphic which you showed us before. He invented an investment funds. And he's maybe one of the first artists, maybe I'm wrong, but if you look at what happened in the 60s, he's definitely the first who wanted to find a way to surpass himself, of course, but to find a way to produce, you know, his dream and to make his dream, you know, available. And he found an economical system
model, yes,
in order, you know, in order to resolve what anybody was, you know, ready to do for him. And there is something like a self-construction which prefigurates to me what happened with some conceptual artists. I'm just thinking about Daniel Buren or many others, you know, who were like Marxists trying to fight against the art system. But Christo did more in one way, because he invented his own system.
Absolutely.
And this is glorious.
An alternative society, an alternative universe. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is absolutely secure. I agree.
My friends, I have to leave you. I'm sorry, I have a lot of meetings. So if you let me, leave you, I have a big hug for Sarah, for Patrice, who I see also, Patrice Delarge, but I need to leave you. So I wish you all the best. Thank you, Annie, for this superb, organization, despite Zoom. And I do hope to see you in the real life in Paris for the exhibition.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And we see Laure that we want to celebrate also. We know how exceptional she was. She's the one who made it happen in Paris, right? And
yeah.
She's part of the team, I heard, from many years. And that's
40
also
years.
40 years. Right? You want to do it? I think you should. Oh, no, I cannot hear you.
I have to
cannot hear you. We can press your microphone.
I don't hear you.
We can.
Sure,
Your
sure.
microphone is muted. Ton micro. Voilà. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, you can speak now.
Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Annie, for your presentation, and thank you all of you. And what I want to say, which is amazing with Christo and Jean-Claude, that they were able to self-finance all their dreams and projects by the works, the drawings and collages of Christo, who are very traditional in the way they are done. That's very interesting. That's meeting with, as Bernard told, a new way and real way of creating being completely free their works, using a traditional method of realizing the works, the preparatory works. That's one of the things which struck me in the Christo process.
But Laure, he needed people like you. I guess he needed people who trusted him and who were part of the family plot. And this was definitely something which I love. He was definitely so involved in what he did that he convinced all of us to be part of the plot. I agree.
And Jacques Villeglay told me something very true about Christo and Jean-Claude, saying that as they were very self-confident, they trust people around them. And also it was a sort of a cercle vertueux. And so that's why they were able to realize so many amazing projects.
I think it is very true.
That's one of the key.
I think it's the way I worked on the presentation with, people in New York, people in Sofia, people in Stockholm, people in Paris. And there is a Christo and Jean-Claude ethics, a real ethics. It's made of expertise, vision, drive, passion, respect, and generosity. And I think you should all go to the website, christoandjeanclaude.com, because there is a part where Jean has written and which is called the errors we should correct. He said, and the eyes were not wrong, they were surrounded. We don't say emballé, we say impacté, so she wanted to be totally precise. So there was ethics, absolutely, and there was also a kind of fidelity, faithful friends and lasting over the decades, right, Laure? How did you meet them? It should be very to tell us, you know, how you met them.
I met them in 1981 during a lecture Christo was giving at the École Polytechnique in Paris, because at the time I was an art student and I decided to make my thesis on the Parisian project of Christo and Jean-Claude. And at the end of this lecture, I introduced myself and I proposed to work as a volunteer for the Paris project. And it started that way. What I want to add is related to the Arc de Triomphe project, that we must really be aware that without the Centre des Monuments Nationaux and Philippe Bellaval and all his team, nothing would have happened too. And that's very important because that's really a team work between Christo team, the Centre Pompidou and the Centre des Monuments Nationaux. And so it's very important to recall that.
But you know, he was ready to come and see the president. He was ready to come and explain everything, you know. There was absolutely no limitation. But I must say that it went more easily than we thought.
Yes. It took,
if you
a few times,
us.
Yeah. But no, the difference with the Pont Neuf that you didn't have to meet so many people and
which
to
you
make
had to
lectures.
resolve with Pont Neuf. But in a way, it went more easily than Pont Neuf.
Yeah, much more. I agree. A big surprise.
A
wonderful surprise.
Yeah, definitely.
Sarah, you want to say something?
Yes, just that I supervised a thesis by a Bulgarian girl, Nia Tabakova.
I cannot hear you.
Well, I'm unmuted. I'm unmuted. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I just said I supervised a Bulgarian girl called Nia Tabakova, who did a lot of work in Bulgaria about Christo, whom I incidentally invited to the Courtauld Institute. But when you said, Annie, in your speech that none of his work ever referred to his past, I wanted to say that both his bypassing of the capitalist economic art market system, one could actually interpret as very communist, and secondly, that in fact she found all sorts of things about how in the holidays he'd had to bind haystacks, cover up haystacks for winter, how they have to cover up sculptures in the winter to stop them cracking and things. And there is actually an incredible weight, a local weight, and a thing relating not to the École des Beaux-Arts, where he had to copy écorché like everybody else, but to the peasant customs and the local customs of Bulgaria that he brings with him into his big projects. So I like to think of his economic system, which I respect very much, as actually also something relating to his communist past, and his relationship to the his view of the art market as something very unpleasantly capitalist, including things like the Rue Visconti. It's blocking up the capitalist flow of the city. So I like to think that he had a kind of idealist dimension of his communist background that he brought forward into the very heart of the capitalist city of New York.
Yes.
That's my view. But if you're doing things on him, I'll find this thesis and I'll find the girl.
Okay.
Be more precise, because obviously I'm just working from memory here.
But you know, Sarah, it's very interesting what you say, because it seems to me that if I were an economist, which I am definitely not, I would try to understand how Christo escaped from any kind of Marxist system, and in another way tried to pervert the American liberalism.
Bernard, people are asking again to repeat the dates. If it wants to dates.
Ask to Laure.
I'm sorry?
The dates for the
dates
Arc
of
de
the
Triomphe will,
Look,
the dates for the Arc de Triomphe will be from September 18th until October 3rd, 2021.
21.
okay.
Yeah, 21, not
In
22.
a year time, in a year time. Fall, not
Yeah,
fall, but
exactly, in more than a year time.
okay, and then show at the Pompidou Center, the exhibition. The exhibition at the Pompidou Center, Laure.
For the, can say that's July
you know,
1st, October 19th, 2020.
yes.
Okay, okay.
And
all
we
right.
were supposed to open in March.
Yes.
And there is a preview for 3 days by the end of June, 28th of June until the 1st of July, for everybody who wants to come.
Okay, okay, okay. Patrice, you joining, Patrice Delage? Your microphone, ton micro, il faut que tu fasses jouer ton micro. Non, il faut que tu... Non, non, on t'entend pas, on t'entend pas. You have to act, no, it's okay, it's okay. All right, so more questions? Patrice? No. Any more questions? And what do you think?
I think this is a good place to wrap up. Ani, if I could just ask if you have any closing remarks to share. This has been a wonderful program.
Yes. I have a closing remark. I think that when I prepared this little talk, and when to organize alternative once Christo couldn't be there, you said we would like to have people from the world, people at the gates, and people from the family. So I asked me, who is Christo's nephew and who was my friend, I said, who should come from the family, from the team? And he said, nobody, Annie, because so wouldn't have liked that. So they work as a team, but with no attitude, no ego trip. Vladimir told me Christo speak at John's memorial service at the Met either, So they respect the ethics. And spoke to Matthias, who is the archivist now. And he said that saw the Reichstags wrapped when he was 11 years old. Everybody was putting pictures of in their bedroom, putting pictures of Christo works. And he wrote a note to Claude and he got back masses of catalogs and so on. And that's how he became part of the team. Same thing with Lorenza in India. She was an art historian and she helped for and she became the team. And Wolfie, the photographer, he was 20 years old out of the Academy of Medicine. And by accident, he met them and he became their sole photographers. It's a collective working for decades together, totally peaceful to each other, respect ethic, and dedicate this presentation to them and this moment to them. Because Christo is bypassing also the time,
Très bien.